Alright, it's time to figure out what Locke was up to during our last episode. This week on 1D10, the show!
The Lone King's castle was falling. In the rain, an invisible creature nearly 30 feet in height had its form just visible due to the pouring rain. It screeched in anger, a screech that Asilva found quite unsettling. Which is a feat, considering the horrors that her father put her through as part of her training. She knew that her father would not approve of how her mission had progressed. The relations with the fairies were worse than they had been before. Much worse. The fairies needed to redirect their anger towards something a bit more worthy of malice. Something that was weak, that trusted, that had a good heart. Someone. She glanced over at Locke, that foolish half-breed that kept trying to connect with her, and she knew just what she had to do. She leaned towards her feline compatriot and whispered, "Trust me on this one, my dear." She ran to Locke, and, adding the slightest hint of desperation, said, "There is no way that we can handle this thing on our own. We need the assistance of the fairies. You are the only one that they trust. You are the peacemaker. If they see this creature, they will know the truth of our story." Asilva glanced toward Felion, who grinned widely, catching on to Asilva's plans. Will you join us?" Seeing that this situation may actually need some extra assistance, and that it was a good way to clear their names, Locke agreed to follow. Asilva and Felion guided Locke into the forest, speaking softly to each other in a language that Locke didn't understand.
"Something you'd like to share?"
Felion piped up in common, saying,
"Asilva has been helping me brush up on my infernal. As a hunter, I need to be prepared to understand any language. Nothing that you need to worry yourself about, young one."
Fair enough.
While Felion and Asilva distracted themselves with their conversation, Locke quickly wrote a note that says, "Help! Set up!" Then, as he passed a tree that looked to have a small branch close to its trunk, he pretended to stumble and used the tree to balance himself, only to deposit the note in a way that the girls wouldn't notice.
Whoops! There's a rock there. I guess my youthfulness didn't see it.
He said with a wink. Felion suddenly stopped and said,
"If we want to stand a chance, we'll need the purple fairies as well. I'll meet you at the green's tree."
She bounded up a tree and began to jump from tree to the east. Asilva huffed, leaned closer to Locke, and said, "I don't know that I trust her. Can you watch my back?"
I don't think we'll have a problem with me doing that. But why do you say you don't trust her? Aren't you teaching her?
The moment that a teacher trusts a student is the moment that they become a servant to them. A teacher must always be wary in order to stay the master.
I would disagree with that. It's the goal of a teacher to make their students even greater than themselves. Otherwise, they're just selfish, scared, and petty.
He said pointedly, emphasizing the last few words.
Tell me, Asilva, what is it that is scaring you to do what you're doing?
A look of surprise crossed Asilva's face for a brief moment, quickly replaced by her iconic stone-faced scowl. "Fear is worthless. It motivates nothing. Anyone who works out of fear is less effective than those working out of self-interest and power." She glanced at the trees. "There," she said, pointing at a small green light about 20 feet out. "That will be one of their watchmen." As the pair walked the last few steps together, Locke whispered quietly,
Courage isn't the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. Now the question is, are you courageous enough to master your fears and make your own choices? Or let your fear make your choices for you?
Silva pointedly ignored the comment, shouting out to the light, Ho there! We have news of our investigation! Suddenly, dozens of green lights appeared, rushing towards Locke and Silva. And a voice, as if all the lights were of a single mind, came from the light saying, Surrender your weapons before we go to the new queen. Silva quickly removed several hidden daggers from creative locations on her person and laid them on the ground. She whispered to Locke, Don't worry, they will not harm us. Locke pulled out his sword and tossed it down. He removed his gun and emptied its chambers of its bullets, sure to emphasize that it was unloaded, then holstered the gun again. Of course, he was also sure not to point out that his hat was decorated with bullets, but what could fairies know of gunsmithing anyway? The lights dashed forward, collecting the discarded weapons. They rushed Locke and Silva toward the tree, surrounded now by hundreds of lights, of both green and purple. As they approached the tree, a purple flame ignited on the ground, with tongues of flame reaching nearly 25 feet in the air. The flames formed into the general shape of a tall woman. The form began to speak with a booming voice. And who is this? The green lights say in one voice, These ones claim to know who killed the king. While difficult to read the features of a woman made of flames, there was a clear look of amusement on the figure's face. Well, I can't wait to hear about it then. Speak. Silva stepped forward. Your Majesty, I am Silva de Pond, daughter of Alorian de Pond. I believe that you know my father intimately. I've been hoping to find a moment to meet with you and renegotiate the terms of our agreement. Locke put his hand up to shade his eyes from the heat and light.
Is the light show really necessary? I get you are royalty and powerful, but I already know that without all the theatrics,
said Locke while discreetly removing 3 bullets from his hat. The queen seemed intrigued as she raised her hand, commanding the flames. The fire slowly gathered around Silva's feet until, with a sudden jerk of the queen's hand, they completely engulfed Silva de Pond.
Well, Lorien will not be pleased with this result. After all, I was supposed to deliver her alive, but your agreement with him did specify that you can do with her as you will. May I inform him that the terms have been met and that the treaty is still in force?
One of the purple fairies extinguished her light and floated to Locke's eye level, saying, She is not harmed. The queen is just having a private audience to negotiate terms.
Well, that changes things.
Locke took advantage of the additional heat to discreetly slip a bullet into his gun's chamber. Meanwhile, Silva found herself in a lavish palace. While her father had spoken to her of the true appearance of the fairies, she still was not completely prepared for the grotesque sight in front of her. This woman was regal. She was power. She was not beauty. Silva looked down at her own body and realized that she seemed to be composed of that purple flame in this world. Quite intriguing. So, Mr. Pond, these recent events have been quite interesting. What do you propose? This man that accompanied me is your way out of hot water, Your Highness. Your man admitted to killing the molehounds and placed the death of the king solely on your shoulders. The queen smoldered, visibly upset. The Greens are upset. They need something to take away suspicion from you. They need a patsy. And luckily this one is the greatest patsy that you could ever hope for. The queen grinned a toothy, disturbing grin. I am willing to prepare a legal statement that will stand up in your Fey courts to show that this man was responsible for the king's death. I have a compatriot who will do the same. You will be free.
And what do you expect to receive in return?
My father needs passage through your realm. We are just now finding a way into the hidden kingdom of the dwarves, but we need to be able to pass through your northern lands.
Those lands are sacred to my people.
Oh, come now. As if you care about that. The Fairy Queen grinned more broadly.
It is a deal.
Oh, also, my compatriot is hunting a merchant that poses one of the Fae. Could you help her out with that?
Certainly.
Back at the camp, the flames surrounding Isilva dissipated as the queen said,
This is an interesting turn of events. Seize the half-elf.
Locke quickly drew his weapon and fired straight at the fiery vestige of the queen. Of course, the bullet harmlessly went through the flames and into the tree behind her. Locke took advantage of the confusion, running from the clearing as quickly as he could. Locke was able to run about 10 feet when a figure bounded from a tree, tackling Locke to the ground as his gun fell out of his hands. A familiar raspy voice growled,
Hold still, young one. I'd hate for the fairies to lose their prize.
Then she shouted,
You'll find the murderer over here!
Valian grinned as she held her claws an inch from Locke's throat, ready to strike. Locke looked up at Felion and did the thing that came most naturally to him. He leaned up and gave her a kiss. This, of course, shocked Felion, giving him the chance to push her off and run again. She cursed, but then an army of mud creatures rose from the ground, securing Locke to it and preventing further movement. Tisk, tisk, my dear, Isilva said as she emerged from the clearing. Are you afraid to face the consequences of your actions? After all, you are the one who speaks so fondly of fear.
Ugh! You really are your father's daughter.
An army of lights rushed to Locke, holding him securely and escorting him back to the tree. The tree itself split in half, revealing a glimmer in the air. The lights urged Locke into the glimmer, and the world around him changed. The trees in this new world were different. Wrong somehow, as if they were sentient themselves. The branches swayed in the breeze unnaturally, and Locke could have sworn that they turned to see his arrival. Not only had the trees changed, but the air itself felt heavy to Locke's lungs, the slight orange haze around him. The biggest change, however, were the fairies themselves. Far from the impish, tiny humanoid creatures that Locke saw in his realm, the creatures surrounding Locke were 6 feet tall with black bat-like wings, 6 eyes, limbs that were contorted in wrong directions, and rows of sharp teeth outlining their devilish grins.
Great. Please don't tell me you're going to start talking in unison and calling each other sisters.
The fairies all looked confused at the comment and urged Locke forward, out of the strange forest and towards a small, seemingly abandoned village. Only about a dozen of the fairies crossed through with Locke. But given their size and power in this realm, it was obvious that he was still easily outmatched. Locke saw a small figure in the middle of the town that shouted his name before disappearing. This place was definitely odd. As the group approached the village, a series of bird calls came from a few of the thatch-roofed buildings, as the guard nearest Locke suddenly crumpled. Hello there, my lovelies. This is Brady, and we have some very exciting stuff planned for this next arc. It will take a little bit of time, so we just ask for your continued patience, but we think that you'll like where it goes. And here in the second half of this epilogue, we are going to introduce you to a new character that may seem a little bit familiar, but we're excited to have Jeff Parks back on board. Once again, I also do want to thank our patrons. So Jeremy and James, you both are absolutely awesome. You help us to do everything that we are currently doing, and you give us a little bit of motivation. So thank you so much. And let's get right back to the episode. The Alliance of the Outer Fae were often viewed as the least of the fairy factions, but they viewed themselves very differently. Unlike those chaotic purples or the hive-minded greens, the yellows of the Alliance had no interest in other realms. They had no love or trust of outsiders. Yet for some reason, the council kept one close by, and she would answer every beck and call like a loyal hound. And so that's what they called her, the Hound. A hound that did not belong in their realm. A hound with a penchant for erratic behavior, dangerous to all around her. To the Yellows watching the forest portal, the events of the past few days changed things. And now the council's eye was directly on them, which meant that they also had to watch the council's hound. They sat huddled in one of the cottages in the village together, chatting quietly and keeping a close eye on the creature on the other side of the room. Truly, how could the council trust this one? It had no wings, only 2 eyes, straight limbs, and odd coloring with its pale skin and red mane. It was not of this world. It did not belong. Fameal was one who thought herself to be a little bit more progressive. She would not be like the rest of her group. Although this creature was different, Fameal would treat it with kindness. She stood up from the group and walked over to the creature, holding out a crust of bread hesitantly. "Here," she said. "You must be hungry." Sitting cross-legged on the chair, the hound snatched the bread, keeping her eyes on Fameal, and said,
"Bread, huh? Bread! Bread, 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 bread. The hound's voice got softer until she was just mouthing words, not looking at or eating the bread. Fameal backed away slowly, keeping her eyes on the creature, and whispered to herself, "What cruel twist of fate led you to this point, strange one?" There was a knock at the door. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. Pause. 4 knocks. Ratail's knock. Fameal carefully opened the door. Ratail was a sight to behold. Crimson skin, dark ebony wings, and a good 6 inches taller than anyone else in the troop. If Fameal was cursed to deal with the council's hound, at least she also got to be with him. "Things get stranger, my friends," Ratail said in his deep baritone. "We know that the greens and purples have allied themselves together, but now they have brought themselves a prisoner from another realm. This one seems to be of the same breed as, well, that." Ratail pointed towards the council's hound. Suddenly, the hound jumped up in her chair, squatting so her feet were on the seat, and said, in a chipper tone, waving the bread, "Hey! Did you guys know they call bread the staff of life? I don't know why, though, because you can't, use bread to resurrect anyone or anything.
The hound slowly started to lean forward until she was laying across the table in front of her, with her knees still on the chair.
Maybe if you use it as a holy symbol or something, you could, cast raise dead. But I don't know, bread would be, a pretty bad holy symbol, it's probably getting by ants or something."
After a brief pause, she cocked her head.
"So who'd those weirdos find? Another half-elf?"
All of the fairies suddenly stopped what they were doing, shocked. One short one with green skin pipes up, It speaks, and I understood." Another one said, "What is a half-elf?" Ratail waved down the commotion, calming everyone, saying, "Come now, we need to focus. The council could always use another hound.
and they will need to come through the town to get to the pass. There are around a dozen of them, and only 6 of us. Normally the odds would be against us, but we have an ace in the hole. Hound, can you focus long enough to help? The hound smiled capriciously.
You guys are so dull. I thought Fae were supposed to be fun. Come on, live a little.
She momentarily had a faraway look, and her smile faded just a bit.
You only live once.
She shook her head and came out of her momentary reverie, focusing on Ratail.
Anyway, yeah, I can help. It's what I do. Help doing. It's what the thing I do is. Let's do the thing we gotta do. Let's do it. Let's get to it.
She paused.
Oh, and by the way, the definition of a half-elf is like twice the people you all are.
She then responded to herself.
Shut up. It makes sense.
Ratail guided the party to different buildings, advising them to prepare for an attack on his signal. The group dispersed, ready for the attack. As they were waiting, a strange lizard creature appeared in the town square, looked towards the approaching fairies with their prisoner, looked concerned for a moment, reaching out towards the group and shouted, "Locke, is that you?" before disappearing just as quickly as it appeared. Ratail looked with concern towards Famail, who gave him a reassuring nod. Ratail snuck outside of the building, hiding in a corner, ready to flank. Famail couldn't help but admire his bravery. But now was not the time to lose herself to fantasy. The group approached more quickly into the town, and Ratail signaled for the attack. Famail put her hounds to her mouth, sounding a bird call as loudly as she could, which was then reciprocated by others in nearby buildings. Famail jumped out of his hiding spot, hitting one of the guards on the back of the head with his staff. Famail turned to the hound and said, "All right, it's time to show us what you can do." As Famail struck the guard on the back of the head, the hound leapt into action. Scrambling on top of a nearby building, she carefully shouted at the remaining guards,
Over here, my friends.
attracting the attention of a few of them, then hid behind a chimney. As the guards prepared to attack her, suddenly they heard her voice from another building behind them.
Or am I over here?
The guards spun around in confusion, trying to place where the second voice came from, when suddenly the voice came from a third place.
Or maybe I'm over here.
One of the guards spotted her peeking out from a chimney on the third building, but got a face full of crackling energy shot from her hands. The biggest, dumbest guard then set his eyes on her, but suddenly a twisted crown of jagged iron materialized on his head. Madness started glowing in his eyes, and he started to attack the guards around him. At the same time, the rest of Ratail's group pressed the attack, but it didn't take too much for the already freaked out guards to turn tail and run, with the mad guards chasing after them. They passed into the forest before anybody could see what it was that guard would do to them.
That's what this hound can do, you blackguards!
As the enemies fled through the forest, Ratail approached Locke. "Are you all right, hound? Can you speak? Can you understand me?"
Hound? And yes, I can understand you.
Ramail was taken back by the coherence of Locke's speech. He composed himself again and said, "Would you prefer a different title?"
You can call me Locke. Thanks for the assist.
That sounds like a name. I did not think that your kind had names. He looked towards the council's hound. "Hound, do you have a name?"
Aw, and I was just getting used to hound. Well, not that anyone will remember in 5 minutes, but it's Kate.
Kate grinned broadly as her familiar, an owl, landed on her shoulder. She took out the crust of bread that Famail had offered her earlier and fed it happily to the owl.
Ha! So this is Kate, the real Kate, I suppose. I can't wait to see what happens next time on 1D10, the show!